You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is the solved case of Danielle van Dam. And this is a case filled with shock, deception, and many odd factors. Nothing is as it seems in this neighborhood. A suspect that has ties to more than one family member, and a family secret that was exposed at trial. This is one that a summary can't really do justice for, but thankfully justice was given to this victim. By the way, I post so much content like this. It is my absolute passion to share these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if it's something you'd like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2002 in California, and the Van Dam family lived in a neighborhood called Sabre Springs, I believe is how you say it, and this was Brenda and Damon, who had 3 children. They had 2 boys and 1 girl. There was a 5-year-old named Dylan, a 10-year-old named Derek, and then a 7-year-old named Danielle, who was born on September 22nd, 1994. She was at this time a 2nd grader, and she was attending Creekside Elementary School. She is the one that we will be talking about today. Now, Danielle loved coloring, drawing, playing piano, and doing things that a normal child loved to do. You could tell she had such a happy childhood and that she really was allowed to be creative and be herself. And, you know, the biggest thing that I heard about Danielle was that she loved to make sure everyone else was okay. She was very in tune with emotions and her empathy, and she just wanted to take care of everyone. And you know, you see this a lot in the oldest child, but she was actually the middle child, and she still felt the same way. She was so full of life and joy, and she either wanted to be a veterinarian or a teacher, which of course sounds perfect for someone who loves caring for other people. And she just sounded like a soul that was made to be a healer. But unfortunately, life was not fair to this young girl. So it was February 2nd, and the Van Dam parents were downstairs in their home cooking breakfast for everybody. It was a Sunday, so everybody was home and ready for a family breakfast. And the children were slowly coming down. You know, they were doing kind of their own thing, waking up at their own times, and both the boys had eventually come down, but Danielle still hadn't. However, this wasn't very suspicious or caused any concern at all, because Danielle was always one to sleep in and be the last to arrive at breakfast. However, they would finish breakfast, and Danielle still wasn't down, so Brenda decided that she was going to go up and wake up her daughter. So she got to her bedroom, and she realized that Danielle wasn't in her bed, so she thought, okay, she's woken up, she's probably, you know, getting ready, and she's somewhere in the house. However, she looked around the rest of the house, and she wasn't there either. The parents wasted no time, and by 9:39 a.m., they were calling the police to report their daughter missing. Now, the investigators didn't take much time at all to get on this case, to start the investigation, to start the search, which isn't given to all victims. So this was incredible that they worked so quickly. And thankfully, within just a few hours, a search team was created, and an entire system was put together for the hundreds of volunteers coming in to help with the search. There was even a Danielle recovery center that was set up at a local real estate agency where people could go and be told, you know, where they needed to search for Danielle. Investigators were extremely on top of this case, talking to everybody they could, but they would retrace Danielle's footsteps for the day that she was thought to actually go missing, or, you know, that night, that early morning that she was found to be missing. They weren't exactly sure when she disappeared, so they went all the way back to that Friday. And this was Friday, February 1st. Of course, it was a school day, and Danielle was 7, so she went to elementary school. Her teacher was named Ruby Puntany, and they would talk to her about what Danielle did, her behavior, if she acted any differently that day. And Ruby said that she really didn't act too strange. They were working on a class project, which basically they were writing personal narratives about themselves. And they were working on, recalling memories. They were supposed to be working on writing about a memory that they would never forget. So that's what they were doing that Friday. However, 30 minutes before school was out, Ruby actually got a call. She was not expecting this call, and when she picked up, the office told her that Danielle was leaving school early and we needed to pack her things and basically go down to the office. Now, Ruby went over to tell Danielle, and Danielle had no idea why she was leaving early or that she was supposed to at all. This isn't something that she was told previously to coming to school. And so Ruby took the paper that she had been working on and noticed that it was a really sad story. The memory that Danielle was recalling was actually about her grandmother's house being broken into. And Ruby, said, "You're supposed to be writing about a happy memory. This is so sad." And Danielle simply told her it was the truth. That's a memory that I'll never forget. And so Ruby had her promise that next time she would write about a more happy memory. And, they agreed. Danielle seemed to be like a good student. She never talked back. She did the work she was supposed to. And she, to her, that was telling the truth and telling a memory she would never forget. So she was doing her work. And so after this, Danielle left the class and she was done with school for the day. Of course, investigators now needed to figure out why she left school early that day, who she left with. And this is when her mother, Brenda, would say that she actually took all of the kids out of school that Friday afternoon, just like 30 minutes before school was out, because they needed to go and get passport photos. This is because their father, Damon, he went on business trips often, and the next one that he had was 2 weeks in Italy. And he decided he wanted to take the whole family with him. So they were getting all of that together. Damon was getting the flights and all the paperwork, and Brenda was going to get their passport photos as well as doing some shopping. So after they got these photos, they actually went to a store called Moto Photo, and then they went to Staples, and then they went to the post office, and then a clothing store called Marvin's, I think it's called. And they were just doing the usual errands, going shopping. Danielle needed to pick up an outfit for a father-daughter dance that was happening that next week because this trip wasn't happening for a little while. So they were still going to be there for the father-daughter dance, and so she wanted to get something fancy to wear, and the boys actually had to pick up a birthday gift for a friend of theirs, which they had a party to go to, I think that weekend or, soon after. So they were all shopping for these things, and they would actually get what they need and head back home. They got there around 5:30 p.m. and then Damon, who was at work the whole day, arrived home from work around 6 to 6:30, and he would actually see Brenda driving up the driveway. The kids were still inside, and she had actually gone to pick up pizza for the night. And so they all were eating some pizza. Damon had about 3 beers, and the parents were said to be smoking at this time as well. And then, so they were all having a really good night, and Damon said a few hours later, about 8 p.m., 2 of Brenda's really close friends named Denise and Barbara would come over to their house. And Brenda would often go out with these two, so Brenda was still upstairs getting ready, and they both just, came in the house as usual, were talking to Damon and the kids, and then in fact sat at the table where Danielle was doing some journaling and talked to her. She was asking them how to spell some words and, what different words meant, always trying to learn different things, and that's when Brenda came downstairs and the 3 of them left. Damon stayed home to watch the kids. He was completely okay with this. The kids were always really good, and Damon said that around 10 p.m. is when he told the kids they finally needed to go to bed. So they all went to do their things. They were old enough where he was giving them some space to actually do what they wanted to do and get ready before he went to tuck them in. So when he finally got upstairs, he found Danielle in her younger brother's bedroom reading him a book. And when she was done with that, he told her, go ahead and go to your own bed and I'll come to tuck you in after I tuck in the boys. So that is exactly what he did. And now Damon and Danielle had quite a little routine at bedtime they both loved so incredibly much. Danielle was already under the covers when her dad got to her bedroom because the routine was about to start. And this was a little game they played every night where her father would pretend to play dead on top of her, like it'd fall completely down. And this sounds weird, but this would make Danielle giggle uncontrollably. She was laughing, and this came from the fact that they started exchanging I love yous, and they would hug each other really tight, and her father wanted her to believe that she was extremely strong, and so they would call these hugs big squeezy hugs. And so Damon would pretend that she was so strong that she basically made him pass out, and he would kind of fall over onto her. And this just made them both so incredibly happy, and it's something that they both looked forward to. So after this, Damon would go downstairs and go to bed himself because he knew that the kids were sound asleep in their own beds. So at this time, Brenda wasn't home. She was still out and about. And so, of course, we needed to fill in the missing puzzle piece of where Brenda went. Brenda would say that she and her two friends went outside of the home and they smoked for a little while before heading to a place called Dad's Cafe and Restaurant, or Steakhouse. This was a restaurant that doubled as a bar that also had a dancing floor and a place to play games. It was just kind of an all-in-one for adults to go. They were there by 8:30, and that is when witnesses of the people who were at the bar who saw them there were talked to about, what exactly happened at the bar, if anything strange, if they saw anybody watching Brenda. And everyone said that these three women were at the bar and they were having a good time, but some strange activities were said to happen because these were actually things that Brenda was doing. Now, she was allegedly said to have told her friends that she wouldn't mind basically taking a couple home, and these were a couple who were also sitting at the bar, and she said this, and then she started dancing with a man named David, and they were doing what witnesses described as dirty dancing. And of course, she had a husband and kids. So this was all occurring, from 8:30 to around 11:30. And bartenders said that they didn't see Brenda there often. She was there sometimes with her friends, but it wasn't like she often was there. And also that the male she was dancing with always just came alone with one of his friends, and they were never really seen together before. But they were also said to know each other because they were neighbors who lived about 2 doors down. Eventually, Brenda, Denise, and Barbara left the bar at around 1:50 a.m. and they brought a few friends with them. This was 2 men named Keith Stone and Rich Brady. Brenda was driving home. She was the designated driver, and she got to her home around 5 minutes later. And that is when she immediately noticed that the alarm system was blinking. She was a little concerned, but that's when she found that the side door that was connected to the garage was slightly open, so she just figured that someone had accidentally left it open. She shut it, the alarm stopped blinking, and they carried on their conversations and partying a little bit more in the home. Damon was actually awake by this point, and he was talking to everyone as well. Damon said that, he had been awake off and on anyways, because an hour prior to them coming home, their dog, who was a Weimaraner? I don't know how to say it, but I'll put a picture of the dog, that was named Layla, was whining and wanted to go outside. So he woke up, he let her out back, and then when she was done, they both came back inside and he went back to sleep before waking up when they got home. Now, eventually, everyone was there. They were talking, they were eating the leftover pizza, and they were there for a little while longer. But, as it got earlier into that morning where they knew they would have to wake up with the kids, everybody went home and Damon and Brenda went to sleep. But they said they didn't check on any of the children because they knew that they were safe and sound in their beds. I mean, they had put them to sleep. Nobody had left. Damon was there the whole time, so they didn't figure it was a necessity to check in on them again. It was the middle of the night. They didn't want to wake them up. So they just went to bed. And an hour later, Damon said he woke up once again because he had to go to the bathroom. That's when he saw that the alarm was blinking once again. And this time, as he searched around the house, he found that the sliding back door was still open. Once again, he figured someone that was partying just a few minutes before had just left it open. So he shut it, the alarm stopped blinking, and he went back to sleep. Again, he didn't check on the kids because he figured that they hadn't gone anywhere. Unfortunately, he was very wrong, because sometime during the time he put them to bed and the time that Brenda checked on Danielle that morning, she had disappeared. Investigators were canvassing the neighborhood, talking to all neighbors to see if they saw anything. They could get a hold of pretty much all of them except for two, and one of which they found had actually taken his motorhome out that morning and was basically out and about, so they couldn't really contact him until he came back. Neighbors saw him leave at around 9:50 a.m. that morning, and investigators had to wait until Monday to speak with him. So this was Saturday morning he left, and it was Monday when he arrived back home. And he would talk to investigators. He said that he drove around the desert and the beach and stayed at the beach campground. Now, he wanted to stay at the desert, but he had realized when he was driving that he had forgotten his wallet. So he was just going to stay at the beach for a while. However, after he paid for those 2 nights to stay there, he realized it was too cold and decided to go home, grab his wallet, and then head back out to the desert, where he stayed until that Monday morning. Unfortunately, that Monday morning he actually got stuck in the sand and had to get a tow truck out, but then he did make it home when they found him. Now, all of this was confirmed when investigators started looking into his cell phone records, gas receipts, and credit card information. Everything checked out. Neighbors said that this was normal for him to go to the desert. They even called him Desert Dave because he always was taking his motorhome out. However, a witness at this beach campground said that they saw him there, but they claimed to see him take out his wallet while he was there. But this was a time when he said he didn't have his wallet. Investigators would also find something that this man had not made a part of his story. And this was that he had stopped at a dry cleaner's. He had dropped off 2 pillow covers, 2 comforters, and a jacket. This man was said to say he had nothing to do with Danielle's disappearance. But his name was David Westerfield. He was a 49-year-old engineer who was self-employed and quite successful. He had no criminal record. He had 2 children who were in college, and he had been divorced twice. He was well-known, well-liked, and super smart. He had actually held several patents for different medical devices. However, now he was being looked into for the kidnapping of a child. We have heard about this man before, because if you remember, the man that Brenda was dancing with was also named David. This was the same man. He was also the same man that Brenda and Danielle had gone to when they were going through the neighborhood selling Girl Scout cookies for Danielle. They had gone to his house 3 days prior and, talked with him, and he had bought some Girl Scout cookies. This man had also been interviewed by the news when Danielle first went missing. They had no idea that he would become a suspect. Now, he was saying that they were able to search anything they wanted, but he gave them a heads up that he cleaned his RV when he returned home, because he always did this after trips. Now, David was given a polygraph test and he failed it. This is when he was immediately placed on 24-hour surveillance, and his RV, SUV, and other belongings were taken in for testing. Now, his RV was found to be cleaned, but not just cleaned. It was steam cleaned with bleach. Thankfully, this wasn't thorough enough, because there would be so much found. There were strands of hair, as well as drops of blood inside this RV, as well as a palm print and a fingerprint above the bed. Now, inside this home, inside his actual home, not the RV, but inside the actual home, were strands of hair in his bed and in his laundry. There were also drops of blood on the clothing that he gave the dry cleaners, and this would all be tested. This belonged to Danielle. Unfortunately, that's not all they would find in his home, because when they searched his computer, they found that there were thousands of sexually explicit material involving children. This was shocking to many who knew him because he was such a normal person. 20 days after Danielle disappeared, they had their first suspect. David was brought in and questioned for 9 hours, and in some of these interviews, that were released to the public, David had asked one of the officers to leave his gun, that he didn't feel stable, and that he also asked to take the polygraph test again. He would claim in court that he was denied a lawyer, he was denied the ability to eat, sleep, or shower, and then basically he was mistreated while in custody. He continued to claim that he had nothing to do with any of this. Investigators still didn't know where Danielle was, but they did believe at this point that she was deceased, and part of the reason that they had to believe this was because they wanted to charge David with her murder. There were also orange and blue fibers found in his motorhome that were said to match the carpet in Danielle's bedroom. There were also animal hairs found that could very possibly match their dog Layla, Danielle's dog, that she always played with. Now, the Van Dams said that there was no way that he would have these fibers or their animals' hairs on him because they barely knew him and he never came inside their home to have those hairs on him. And so he would have basically only been in the home to take their daughter. Danielle could have also not been lured into his motorhome on a different occasion because he actually parked his motorhome in a different location and he didn't keep it at his home. This is when it came out that David might have had this all planned out, what he was going to do that night, because allegedly Brenda went out every Friday to this bar with her friends. And when she was with David, trying to get him to buy some Girl Scout cookies, they began to talk about seeing each other at the bars and if they would see each other the next Friday. Brenda began to tell him that she wanted to go, but she needed to get a babysitter because her husband and boys were going out of town on a little trip. Now, this was true. Damon and the boys were going on a trip together, and investigators theorized that he heard this and knew that this was the perfect opportunity to sneak in when there was a babysitter only watching Danielle. But he didn't know that the boys and Damon actually had to cancel their trip. Unfortunately, that didn't stop him from taking her. This was all just basically speculation on what had happened because David still wasn't talking. David was being taken to trial at this point, charged with kidnapping, possession of child pornography, and murder. However, a plea deal was in the works, trying to find Danielle's body, basically saying that he could get life instead of death in exchange for telling them where she was. It was now 5 days later, 25 days since Danielle disappeared, and on February 27th, they would no longer need that plea deal because Danielle would be found. On Dessa Road, 25 miles from her home, Danielle would be found on the side of the road, nude, and she was partially decomposed and missing some of her teeth. And unfortunately, when she was taken in for an autopsy, she was already too composed to determine the cause of death or to see if she had been sexually assaulted. But now at least her family could give her a proper burial, and meanwhile David Westerfield was still pleading not guilty, but this time he could be charged and given a death sentence because his plea deal was no longer needed. Now on June 4th, the trial began, and the prosecution claimed that when the side door of the garage was left unlocked, David was able to get in without being heard, and a witness actually said that they had left the door unlocked on accident, which I'm assuming is one of Brenda's friends, who came forward to say that this was basically her fault for leaving the door open. The prosecution reminded the jury they didn't have to tell them exactly how this kidnapping happened. They only had to prove that it did. David's defense started to say that the police never considered any other suspects, they just wanted to close the case, and the defense even tried to say that what was found on his computer was actually from his 18-year-old son, named Neil. Neil then took the stand and said, absolutely not, this is not my doing, and his own father blamed him for that, to try to get away with what he did. Now, David said that he was after this didn't work, David said that he was only gathering those images and videos because he was going to take it to Congress to show them, what he was finding on the internet. And when this was not working, they then decided to go to blaming the parents and making it seem like they were horrible parents. They claimed that Damon and Brenda were in an open marriage, they were swingers, they smoked often, and that is what caused their daughter to be kidnapped because they were always bringing people into their home that were sketchy characters, is what the defense called them. Now, the parents were very honest about this when they were spoken to. They said, all of that really is true. We are in an open marriage. We do have people over. We do smoke. But we're not to blame for our daughter's kidnapping. The defense continued on, saying that when Danielle was said to have been dumped, because they concluded this based on, the bugs in her body, they said that this was a time period when David was already in police custody, so it couldn't have been him that dumped the body. There was also said to be a hair found under Danielle's body that did not belong to him. They also said that David might be bad, but he wasn't the worst of the worst. So that was what they were trying to say, so nobody found him guilty. David's niece then came forward and said that when she was 7 years old, David actually came into her bedroom when he was an adult, she was a child, and she woke up to him rubbing her teeth. And she was really scared, so she bit him on the finger, ran down to her mom, told her mom, and when her mom confronted David, he said he just went in there to check on them and make sure that they were, comfortable and comforted. And that was basically the last time that any of the family talked about it, and this was the first time she was talking about it again. Now, David said nothing the entire time his trial was going on. He didn't testify, didn't say a word, but Brenda did. Brenda told David in court, "It disgusts me that your sick fantasies and pitiful needs made you think that you needed Danielle more than her family. You do not deserve any leniency, any mercy, because you refused to give it to Danielle." 2 months later, on August 21st, David was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and possession of child pornography. He was sentenced to death. Now, Brenda said that the only reason she still gets out of bed and handles all of this is because of her boys. The family has kept her room exactly how it was, but they don't just lock it up and, keep it preserved. They actually let the boys play in there because they don't want them to forget who she was. David was incarcerated at the San Quentin State Prison, and the Van Dams actually sued him, but the case was settled and they ended up with $416,000 and a confirmation that David would never profit from his crime. Now, David's own children, who were named Neil and Lisa, actually filed a petition to change their name because they didn't want to associate with their father anymore. They changed it to from Westerfield to West. But some people believed that David was wrongfully accused, especially when a year later in 2003, the San Diego police would receive a letter with a person confessing to murdering Danielle. They said their name was James Selby. This was a person that the police knew well because he was looked into for a whole bunch of sex-related crimes in the area and in states surrounding, and he had actually also confessed to killing JonBenet Ramsey. Now, this is what caused many people to believe that he was someone who just liked to confess and didn't actually know anything about the people that he was confessing to. But unfortunately, we don't know the truth about him, because a year later, when he was awaiting his sentencing for another crime, he actually took his own life. People who said that they believed that David was innocent said that that was because there was a testimony from his sisters saying that when his father died, he took care of the whole family and he was very sensitive to everyone's needs, and friends said that he was a creative, talented guy who was very involved with his children. But is this because he was innocent or because he was extremely good at hiding who he really was? This isn't where the case ends, though, because in 2019, David was up for an appeal. Thankfully, his conviction was upheld, and Brenda said, "We are not surprised that his automatic appeal was denied because the trial evidence presented by prosecutors Jeff Dusick and Woody Clark amplifies supported conviction, and the defendant's legal representation by 3 lawyers was more than adequate. The death penalty appeal process has already taken too long and has been a waste of taxpayer money. The cruel irony is that Judge Mudd, co-prosecutor Woody Clark, and Danielle are no longer alive, but he is. It's time for justice to be served for Danielle." Some of you may know that the death penalty in California hasn't been carried out since 2006, and Danielle's family said that they know that he will die in prison. Brenda said, "Honestly, I feel the longer he's in his box, he's being tortured. I hate to say this as a person, but whatever is worse for him is better for me. Her family created the Danielle Legacy Foundation to promote volunteerism that will initiate positive changes that will put children's safety first. Danielle also had an overpass near where she was found named after her in her honor, and Danielle's brothers have gone through a lot of trauma through this too. When she first was found, they were terrified, and they ended up sleeping in the same room together. They didn't want to leave the house, and the family had to lock things up really tight to make them feel safe again. Because it's scary enough to know that monsters are out there, but to know that there was a monster lurking so close to you that didn't look like a monster at all is even more horrifying. Now, Dad's restaurant and bar that Brenda had gone to that night has actually become even more popular because of this case, and everybody wants to go there and ask the bartenders if they knew them, if they were there that night, and just ask questions about the whole case because people are just fascinated with that kind of stuff. However, the owner feels horrible because he feels like he's profiting off of the murder of a young girl, and he's very sensitive to that and doesn't really want to talk to people about what he knew, what he saw, anything like that. The bar had also just started swing dance classes, just like a fun little thing to do on the dance floor, and they actually had to stop doing this because there was so much speculation and rumors about this being a place where swingers went, because Brenda and Damon came out as swingers and they had gone to this bar. And so, of course, although the swing dance class had nothing to do with actual swingers, the name didn't do anything good for their business, so they just canceled it altogether. Now, the fact that her parents were swingers, the fact that they smoked, is something I didn't really talk about much in this case because I don't think it really matters. I mean, yes, somebody could have, come in and had some anger towards Brenda and Damon for, not letting them be a part of their relationship, or possibly kicking them out after they had, been a part of it. But I don't really think that was the case, even if you believe that David was wrongfully convicted, because if this was revenge, you would think that they would have known more about it. They would have gotten a ransom note, they would have gotten some sort of knowledge that this was due to the fact that they didn't let them in the relationship and that it was because of their relationship. And I mean, I guess David did say, or his defense did say, that it was because they were swingers. So we could speculate that David was a part of their relationship at one point, and we just will never know about that. However, the parents have never said anything about this. They couldn't have expected David, their neighbor, to do this. I'd love to know what you think when it comes to this case. If David was guilty, you think he had any involvement with Brenda and Damon, or possibly just Brenda? Do you think it had anything to do with that relationship as to why he took their daughter? Or did he possibly just dance with Brenda to get closer to her daughter? Or possibly, have a relationship with them to get closer to Danielle? Because I think the images on his computer say a lot. But overall, this is such a strange case, and I just hate the fact that, David didn't ever look like he could do any harm. I mean, from his past, other than that one incident where he was rubbing the girl's teeth, he had nothing showing any signs. When he was little, there were no signs. We see a lot of killers that hurt animals or just act weird, and he didn't. He was really successful and really well liked, and that is the scariest people of all, at least to me. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.